and is most likely trying to change the conversation by saying things like this today. All Republicans must remember what they are witnessing here, a lynching. Many quickly condemned the president's remarks. Some Democratic lawmakers pointed out the president is trying to distract the country.
It is very painful, and it is a distraction that America should not accept or tolerate. And frankly, we should proceed constitutionally as we are, as members of Congress, to do our job.
I think that what we see here, once again, is this president attempting to change the narrative, using what I consider to be real caustic terms in order to change the conversation, to compare the constitutional process to something like lynching is far beneath the office of the President of the United States.
The congressman from South Carolina. But as we showed you earlier, that somehow brings us to Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. The site, by the way, of 164 recorded lynchings of African Americans. Senator Graham knows the history and doubled down on the president's use of the word. Separately, the Daily Beast reports tonight that the president's allies are upset with Graham for not holding hearings in the Judiciary Committee looking into Joe Biden's son and Ukraine. With all of that in mind, we are happy to have with us tonight Jason Johnson, politics editor at The Root. Jason, first off, I thought we'd start with a definition for our viewers. A lynching is mob rule. It is murder by mob without due process of law, without any process, often accompanied by torture. It is, in short, the worst thing humans can do to each other, the worst thing to imagine a family member of any of us going through. We should also mention it was my privilege in June to visit the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, in effect, our nation's lynching memorial. It is no less impactful than the Holocaust Museum, than Yad Vashem in Israel, than the 9/11 Museum. I wish it was a right of citizenship for all people to visit the memorial. Having established that, Jason, your take on the invocation of this powerful word in our national discourse today.
Well, first, Brian, the reason that this can happen so glibly on the part of this president is the lack of history that most Americans understand. Lynching is still seen as this terrible thing that occasionally the Klan did. People don't realize things that happened in Camilla, Georgia, or Lawrence, South Carolina, or all throughout Arkansas, or what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, until they watch Watchmen on Sunday. Most Americans don't realize that acts of terror on the part of white Democrats, white citizens, police officers in the Army were standard in this country for over a century after the end of the Civil War. If there was even the slightest inkling of understanding on the part of the average American about how pervasive lynching was, how violent it was, the women who were raped and then lynched, the children who were lynched, the men whose body parts were cut and stuffed in their mouths and then lynched, you would never have any president, even one who has the sort of racial mindset that Donald Trump has, would ever get away with being able to use that terminology. So it's not just a reflection of how bad and how racist a lot of Donald Trump's language is, Brian. It's a reflection of how many Americans do not understand how serious and how bloody our history is, so they can act shocked that someone does something like this as opposed to immediately condemning it.
Jason, I'm going to read you a quote you have long since put to your memory. Strange Fruit, sung by Billie Holiday in the late 1930s. Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root. And this is the act being used today politically to send everyone to their corners.
Yeah, and here's the other thing, Brian. I think it's important to remember. It also reflects, we're in, 5-6 years since sort of the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement. There's an undercurrent to that. The fact that black death and violence and lives can be thrown out so easily whenever somebody faces political inconvenience. Donald Trump could have said it's a witch hunt. Okay, that's fine. Donald Trump could have said it's a hoax, it's a fraud, it's unreasonable. But the fact that he can throw out something that has a long and bloody history, both in our popular culture and in the lives of people, there are still victims of lynching who are trying to get restitution from states now, shows that he doesn't care. He doesn't care, and he has a party that doesn't understand. And I think this is very important. for people to remember in the future. This is not the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, or 27th time that Donald Trump has said something that is perceived by many people with any degree of knowledge by racists. By basically asking for the death penalty for the exonerated 5, he was asking for a modern-day lynching. What we need to understand is that if we have a president of the United States who can so easily and glibly invoke violence against others to defend himself, you have to recognize this is a man who will never defend any citizen who he does not see as a direct reflection of his own needs and desires. And that's the true danger of Donald Trump and a lot of his language on Twitter.
So let's turn, if we can, toward politics and the upcoming race in 2020. Article in the New York Times got a lot of attention. Anytime a crowd of otherwise hushed donors gathers in a restaurant in New York to make kings and queens out of what they see before them, the talk is the Democratic funders are not happy with the current slate. There's all kinds of questioning about who's out there, who could get in, all of this under the banner of what I like to say on this broadcast: no one can screw up an election like the Democrats. What do you make of all of this talk, Jason?
I completely agree with you. Democrats are they're the party of fear. They never seem to be happy. Look, I'm old enough to remember op-eds being written in 2012 saying maybe Obama should drop out because they didn't think that he was going to be able to survive after the Great Recession in 2011 and some of the negotiation he did since. Look, at the end of the day, what we have to understand is the same group of rich donors are the ones that have led Democrats to consistent defeats at the state level and the national level. Their desire for some mythical centrist candidate who can somehow get former MAGA voters in Lordstown, Ohio, and also get a liberal 20-something couple living in Charlotte, North Carolina, that person doesn't exist. You have to operate with a candidate who can inspire people and move them towards your politics. Donald Trump didn't turn the nation into MAGA. He dragged the nation to MAGA. Barack Obama didn't make the entire nation inspired. He dragged them towards inspiration. So rather than trying to force a 2020 candidate into some mythical Democratic box, they should look to support the candidate who can inspire the most people. And that won't be Hillary Clinton, and it won't be Sherrod Brown, and there's no magical person out there who's going to appear and run, even if The Rock decides that he's going to throw his hat into the ring.
And here's a loaded question, because when you're on TV, I watch, and I saw you this afternoon. Will you be buying the book by Anonymous, Jason?
I really don't want to buy the book, but I will probably have to for the purposes of understanding this job. Look, I can't respect people who want to constantly talk about the dangers coming to this country, but do not want to put their names and faces on their line. Journalists put their names on the line. Police officers put their names on the line. Activists, whistleblowers put their name on the line. If you truly care about the United States of America, you should be able to put your lips and your face behind these words. Otherwise, you're just whistling into the wind.
And that is why we asked Jason Johnson to come on our broadcast tonight. Thank you, sir, very much for taking our questions.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up.